Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today I want to talk about Season 9 of The Walking Dead and why I think it's probably one of the best seasons so far. So let's get to it. Alright, so for those of you who don't care about The Walking Dead, you don't care about spoilers, so whatever. But for those of you who do, there may be the odd spoiler or two. I'm not going to go into that much detail. There's not really any major events that have happened so far this season anyways. There's been a couple, but nothing of great significance that's going to really spoil the show for you. So one of the things I like about this season is that it's far more realistic in what a world like that would look like a few years out from a total grid down scenario where clearly 90 to 95% of the people are just gone. The group has now been forced to employ 19th century methods of harvesting food, growing food, defending themselves, transportation. They're building bridges now, bringing in the horse and plow. They're starting to repurpose old truck beds and pair that with horses as a wagon. The scavenging of the remnants of the old world has pretty much almost come to a close, at least with the perishable items for sure. But even a lot of the other things, like the gasoline is now gone. They're now making ethanol. So maybe the show was responding to some of its critics who were talking about the implausibility of some of the tools that they were using in the show, that, you know, they shouldn't have been driving cars for the last 2 years of the show at least, because all the gasoline would be gone. So even though the show is complete fiction in that regard, and going back to that more 19th century pace of things, I think it's quite accurate, because up until this time there was infinite bullets, even though they did start having to make ammunition last year. There's this one great scene when they're in the museum, which I thought was a great way to start season 9, because it's, you know, they're trying to learn how people used to do things, and it's just interesting to see the characters interact with the history of man. And it's almost like that was the point when they were finally really truly leaving civilization behind and starting a new world, because they were going in there to steal a plow and to steal all these old antique farm equipment. So as the characters are walking through the museum, they see this mural, this Darwinian evolutionary mural, which had, you know, the hunched over Australopithecus, or whatever the heck his name is, all the way up to Homo erectus, the upright walking human. And right after that one, there was this zombie stapled to the wall. So it was kind of like, you know, we've evolved to be upright, and then we turned into zombies. I just thought that was pretty clever how they threw that in there, because it's significant in a variety of ways, both metaphorically and literally. Because on the one hand, yes, we have become a zombie nation. This, of course, making reference not only to the literal end of humanity by becoming zombies, but I also think it symbolizes, just like the show Dawn of the Dead symbolized, that in many ways we have become a zombie nation. One look at the YouTube trending feed confirms this, is that after Einstein, it was pretty much all downhill from there. This is what makes the show great. It's the dialogue. It's not the zombies and all the shoot 'em up and the blow 'em up stuff. That's all secondary to what makes this a great show. What makes it so epic is that it attempts to expose human nature out of this chaotic context where society has broken down. In order to truly understand human nature, you need a full-blown without rule of law situation. And that's exactly what The Walking Dead is. It provides a context for us to at least theorize about how society would be reconstructed based on whatever virtue remains that was left behind by the old world. You could argue there isn't much virtue nowadays, but the show is trying to demonstrate how we came basically from our primal selves into the state of civilization as we are today. The group, Rick's group, started off as a nomadic tribe. And the tribe was going from place to place and scavenging resources, living off the old world. And eventually they found a few places. They found the prison where they tried to lay anchor by themselves. They boxed themselves in. And then they found Alexandria, which was a step up, which was, of course, maybe a reference to the city of Alexandria, the library of Alexandria, the civilization amidst chaos. Within Alexandria, there's one of the husband of the wife, of the politician wife who's running the show, Rich. He tells Rick, civilization starts when you stop running. Civilization can only begin when you lay anchor and when you start planting crops and sowing seeds in the ground. That's the only way you can have civility. Otherwise, people are roaming to and fro. There's no consistency. There's no structure, routine that is required to develop the specialization that we've come to know in our civilization. We've gone through some feudalistic phases. Perhaps that's the phase we're in right now. And we're starting to see now, we've passed the tribal level of things with The Walking Dead, where you have, what do you have? You have Alexandria, you have the Saviors, you have Oceanside, you have the Hilltop. All of these groups now are starting to trade, so you're starting to see the emergence of a marketplace, commerce in a sense. And now it's a matter of getting all these tribes to work together in a way which doesn't turn into chaos once again. And that's kind of going to be the main focal point of this video, is the struggle of how do you lead people in that sort of way. So the tribal level is now starting to be consolidated into a regional group with all of these different groups within this small region. So perhaps not quite at the state level yet in terms of scope, scale, but we're coming on to a regional level now of governance, which is overseen by Rick and his group. Now, there have been hints in the show with the helicopters flying over, and I think within reference to the comic books, there is this group which is probably going to emerge, because you can bet your bottom dollar that the government has been hiding somewhere throughout all of this, and undoubtedly they're going to manifest from their bunkers rather shortly, I would say, in the show, because there's been a lot of suggestions, the helicopters flying over. And I predicted this long time ago with my video called Negan in the New World Order, where I basically suggested that, you know, we all start off as individuals in a primal state, and we gradually become more and more civilized to the point which encompasses the entire planet, which we're seeing today with globalization. So we become one species. The only thing left to unify the human race as a whole now is arguably alien invasion. That's why you have this push right now between nations who are trying to retain their sovereignty and this global elite, if you will, who are trying to consolidate everything. And that's arguably the natural progression of things, because if you look at Rick and his group, they started off as nomads, and this is how all societies started off. Then you have law and order that's imposed on a regional or nationwide level, so you have nations. And then, of course, now we have the United Nations, and beyond that, who knows what's next. One of the challenges that Rick finds himself in is, how do I keep these people from getting at each other's throats? Now, there's a lot of background that I have to go into to explain the dynamic between the different groups. Basically, the Saviors were conquered. They're one group. They were conquered by Rick's group and the other 2 or 3 groups. So needless to say, lots of the Saviors are resentful because Rick had captured their leader. And of course, Negan was the guy who led as projecting himself as some kind of demigod onto the people. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in the 48 Laws of Power and how that pertains, by making yourself seem like more than you are so that you can lead people and that they'll follow you, hence the "we are all Negan." So Rick is now essentially governing these different tribes, but there really is no common judiciary process amongst them. There is no Supreme Court. There is just dictators within each fiefdom, if you will. Maggie is one of them, and Oceanside has its own. Alexandria, of course, has Rick. So now you have all these groups in different regions with different interests which are trying to interact in a peaceful way, and Rick is trying to keep the peace. This is where the difficulty of leadership comes in, because Rick is trying to appease one group, the Saviors, who, for whatever reason, you know, they're not able to grow crops because these guys were trained to extort resources from other people for so long. So they don't have the skills like the Hilltop with growing crops and animal husbandry. And all the other colonies, like the kingdom is another one I forgot about with Ezekiel, they're basically self-reliant. They can create their own stuff. So in order to prevent the fomenting of revolution, Rick is trying to help the Saviors get on an even keel with all the other groups, and to show that, hey, you can be a part of this community. We're going to support you. We're not going to, slaughter all of you or anything like that. We're going to try to bring you into the fold. And this creates resentment with the other groups who really dislike the Saviors. So I can see things from Rick's perspective. You see, the general sees things differently than the soldiers on the battlefield. And it's very difficult. Any of you who've worked in management know that when you're trying to mediate between two parties and you're trying to see things for the common good, that's obviously not a perspective which is always shared with your subordinates. So Rick is now tasked with trying to keep everybody happy. And some of his lieutenants are in disagreement with some of his methods. So Rick is in a tough spot because the Saviors are resentful towards Rick. And so he's trying to constantly appease them and show them that, you can live like this. You don't have to go out and steal and maraud from people. You can actually have a civilized existence in this world, and you can do it on your own. On the flip side of that, you have these other groups who don't want to share. They want to thrive. They don't see why they should have to support the Saviors. And this is a problem, that there's always going to be that discrepancy between what the leader sees and what the subordinates see. And what Rick needs to do right now, in my opinion, he needs to create some sort of common belief system. He needs to, employ some Negan-like strategy where he makes a demigod of himself. A common enemy is another unifying factor, or just a shared constitution that all of the tribes can agree on. There needs to be ambassadors, diplomats, in order for peace to actually be a possibility. Otherwise, you're going to get miscommunication. People will continue to begrudge the other groups, thinking that they're not getting their fair share. So this is where politics and the judiciary process come in a post-collapse world. They enter here when you have different tribes trying to get along with each other and not kill each other. Because you got to remember, we were naturally in tribes for thousands of years before we made the quantum leap to nation states. And Rick is trying to really do that in a rapid pace, it would seem. I mean, the whole evolution has been rapid, but the jump to bring all of these different groups of people together under the auspices of one constitution, one judiciary process, is a huge task to embark on. And he's starting to see that. And so now you're starting to see Michonne walking around talking about how we need different laws. And of course, there was a capital punishment situation with Maggie, who had to impose capital punishment on someone who was trying to take her out. And she did that in a very cold, calculated manner, which I think has merit in that situation. Something like that has merit. But once again, you need to make sure the punishment always fits the crime. Because as she's starting to see now, there's a lot of people who are upset with her for making that decision. And why did she get to be the arbitrator of that decision? So politics is a real thing, and there's a real need for it. As much as we say, oh, we don't need all these politicians and blah, 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 we actually do. Now, granted, a lot of the politics you see in Parliament, in the House nowadays, is just for show. A lot of it is a big waste of money. You know, these guys sit there and argue about this stupid stuff all day, which some, smart computer could probably figure out in a nanosecond and probably do a better job of it. But regardless, there was a time and place when politics was really needed. And I think this is where you're going to see the emergence in the transition between tribalism into nation state. You had politics within the tribe where you had the one chief, but it wasn't as dynamic, and it was far more cohesive because you had everybody in one distinct region for one. So they weren't, weren't in different locations. So they have a lot more in common. So it's much easier to control people when they have everything in common. You don't need religion. And that's another reason why religion came to the fore as a dominating social unifying force, is because a common belief system will keep people from killing each other, basically. And this is where religion might come in again as well. So I'm wondering if and when Rick is going to see the value of employing religion as a means of social control, quite frankly. I mean, you're going to get to a point where you don't have the luxury of having a court system yet. So there's a few ways that you can go about trying to control a population. You can control education, which is going to be something else which emerges in these communities, and there's going to be a debate over what people should be taught about the history of mankind, what came before. You're starting to see libraries now in these communities within the Walking Dead universe. There's also, of course, morality and ethics, which is taught through either religion or some form of philosophy. And of course, you're going to have the judicial process, which you're going to bring in. And of course, there's a political process, that whether it's going to be a democracy, how that's going to be structured. There already has been some democratic process at the hilltop with the voting in of people. So politics is going to play a crucial role. You need leadership. We need leadership right now. So under no terms will there be some utopia emerges post-collapse where we live in this anarchic state where there is no leader. You may even, of course, have monarchies emerge, like with King Ezekiel, right? So, but Rick is tasked with a very difficult job. And I know a lot of people, when they're talking about full-on apocalyptic grid down, we don't typically punch out that far into the future with our musings, because most people don't think beyond the level of intra-tribe dynamics. But it's really the inter-tribe dynamics that is probably going to be one of the most complicated steps to make in terms of trying to bring back civilization. And that's going to be the case whether this is overseen by government, some form of martial law, or if it's something which just naturally emerges like it has in The Walking Dead, with these different groups which have naturally conglomerated together for whatever reason. They were in the same place, same time. People flocked together for various reasons, and it organically emerged as these different groups warring with one another, compared to, you know, a government trying to get a handle on a situation by trying to appease all the various parties. Another thing I really like about this season, some people know this is the season that Rick is supposed to die. This is a good thing. It's a good thing because it validates the show's main premise, The Walking Dead. All the characters are Walking Dead because they all have the virus. It's arguable that the reason why The Walking Dead is failing right now is because Rick hasn't died yet. The initial allure of the show was such that you were very intrigued because you knew any character could be gone at any time. As the character development started to progress, they started to be more and more stingy about who they killed off. You know, we got Glenn and Abraham in season 5, but really those were like the biggest deaths of the series. There's been a few other ones. You know, there's been Carl, of course, and some other, you know, B characters. But when you take that element out of the show and you just have all these fanboys crying anytime one of their favorite characters gets offed, it just turns into a soap opera, and it loses its initial allure, which is it's about survival. And if everybody always survives, then it's, you know, it's not intriguing to people anymore. So I'm glad Rick Grimes is on the way out. I think they're going to be able to build the story and all these other character arcs in much more depth than they could. So let me know what you guys think about season 9 of The Walking Dead so far. I think it's a great season because we're really it's turning into hell on wheels. Like, it's turning into a Western, which I think is awesome. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this YouTube channel is to support yourself by gearing up through CanadianPreparedness.com or BugoutRoll.ca. Premium quality gear at the best possible price using the incredibly secure and easy to use Shopify platform. We offer free shipping to the United States for orders over $200 USD and free shipping to Canada over $75. So support the channel by supporting yourself.